This is the nitty-gritty time as far as being nervous, you know.
I just missed it. I missed the closeness of an audience, of a live audience.
Elvis Presley, once the electrifying king of rock and roll who revolutionized music in the 1950s, was by the mid-1970s a shadow of his former self. The man who had commanded stages with his swiveling hips and soulful voice was now fighting an uphill battle against his own body and the weight of fame. While the public still adored him, those closest to Elvis knew the truth. He was exhausted, physically unwell, and struggling to maintain the energy that had once made him unstoppable. The decline didn't happen overnight. In the late 1960s, Elvis had successfully staged his career comeback with his iconic '68 comeback special. His Las Vegas residencies in the early 70s were initially a huge success, drawing sold-out crowds and reviving his popularity. But the grueling performance schedule began taking a toll. He would often perform twice a day, several days in a row, with very little rest in between. This intense schedule was combined with long travel days, endless fan interactions, and pressure from his management to keep the money flowing. Elvis' health began to suffer. He developed high blood pressure, glaucoma, and an irregular heartbeat. His diet fluctuated wildly, sometimes eating very little, other times indulging in high meals like his infamous peanut butter, banana, and bacon sandwiches. Weight gain became noticeable, and the once fit star now appeared bloated and tired in public appearances. The Elvis that audiences saw on stage was still charismatic, but his performances were often interrupted by moments of fatigue and heavy breathing. Adding to his struggles was a growing dependence on prescription medication. Elvis' personal physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, often called Dr. Nick, prescribed a range of drugs for pain, insomnia, and anxiety. While these medications may have been intended to help him cope, they created a dangerous cycle of dependency. By the mid-1970s, Elvis was taking a cocktail of pills, daily sedatives to sleep, stimulants to wake up, and painkillers to keep going in between. Career-wise, the magic was fading. While Elvis still sold tickets and records, the music industry had shifted. New rock bands and pop stars dominated the charts, and his once innovative sound now felt like a relic of a past era to younger audiences. For Elvis, this change was devastating. He had built his life on being the center of musical innovation, and now he was watching the world move on without him. Behind closed doors at Graceland, his Memphis estate, friends and family noticed a change. Elvis became more reclusive, often avoiding public appearances unless absolutely necessary. He spent hours in his bedroom, sometimes watching TV late into the night, other times reading spiritual or self-help books. He seemed to be searching for meaning beyond the stage lights, something that might fill the emptiness fame could no longer satisfy. Despite his struggles, there were still flashes of the old Elvis moments when he would laugh, joke, and sing with friends, reminding everyone why he had become a legend in the first place. But those moments were growing fewer, replaced by a man weighed down by health problems, personal demons, and the crushing burden of living up to his own myth. By 1977, the warning signs were everywhere. His performances became increasingly erratic. His speech occasionally slurred, and his physical appearance alarmingly changed. Fans noticed. Critics noticed. But few could have guessed that Elvis Presley was heading into the final, mysterious chapter of his life, one that would end abruptly, leaving behind questions that remain unanswered to this day. Sunday, August 14, 1977, began in a deceptively calm way at Graceland, Elvis Presley's beloved Memphis estate. The mansion, usually buzzing with friends, staff, and the occasional fan lucky enough to glimpse the king, was quieter than usual. Elvis had recently returned from a tour and was supposed to rest before his upcoming performances. But those close to him noticed the telltale signs that something wasn't right. His energy was low, his mood was subdued, and he had been increasingly withdrawn. Friends say Elvis spent much of that day secluded in his bedroom, avoiding visitors. Graceland's staff, familiar with his rhythms, didn't think much of it at first. Elvis had always been a night owl who preferred privacy. He was reportedly working on song ideas and flipping through spiritual books, something he often did when searching for meaning or comfort. Still, there was a heaviness in the air, an unspoken concern among those who knew him best. That evening, Elvis had dinner with his girlfriend, Ginger Alden. They discussed his upcoming shows and even made casual plans for the week ahead. But behind Elvis's charming smile and easy conversation, Ginger noticed his fatigue. He seemed distracted, as if weighed down by thoughts he couldn't share. The night of August 15th into the early morning of August 16 was unusually restless for Elvis. He had always kept unconventional hours, often staying awake until dawn. But this night was different. He complained about difficulty sleeping and physical discomfort, pacing his room between phone calls and brief attempts to rest. Several friends later recalled that Elvis seemed on edge, though they couldn't pinpoint why. He made calls to a few acquaintances, talking about everything from music to his daughter, Lisa Marie. yet his voice carried a weariness that was hard to ignore. In one conversation, he reportedly said he felt like he had run out of road, a haunting phrase that would take on chilling significance in the days to come. Around 4 a.m., Elvis was seen in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge for a snack, a familiar habit before heading back upstairs. Ginger Alden, who had dozed off, awoke to see him heading into the bathroom with a book in hand. That was nothing unusual. Elvis often read for hours at night, especially about religion, history, or numerology. Still, she couldn't shake a strange sense of unease. The morning began like so many others at Graceland. Staff moved about the mansion quietly, preparing breakfast and tending to daily chores. Ginger was still asleep when Elvis, dressed in his signature pajamas and robe, told her he was going into the bathroom to read. She barely stirred, thinking nothing of it. Minutes passed. Then hours. Around 1 p.m., Ginger awoke and realized Elvis hadn't returned. She called his name, but there was no answer. Pushing open the bathroom door, she found him lying motionless on the floor. His book lay beside him. In an instant, the world seemed to freeze. Panic set in as she screamed for help. Al Strada, one of Elvis's bodyguards, rushed in, followed by other staff members. They tried to revive him while waiting for emergency services. The scene was chaotic. The man who had electrified the world now lay silent, unresponsive. The ambulance arrived within minutes, rushing him to Baptist Memorial Hospital. Doctors worked frantically, but the situation was dire. At 3:30 p.m., Elvis Presley was pronounced dead. The news would soon ripple around the globe, leaving millions in shock and disbelief. By the mid-1970s, the Elvis Presley the public adored was not the same man struggling inside Graceland's gates, away from screaming fans and bright spotlights. Elvis's health was deteriorating rapidly. His weight fluctuated drastically. His skin grew pale, and his one's electric energy dulled. To casual observers, it might have looked like the king had simply aged too quickly. But those close to him knew the truth. He was living a life dictated by cycles of performances, exhaustion, and heavy reliance on medication. Friends noticed Elvis isolating himself more, often spending entire days locked away in his bedroom, where he surrounded himself with books, television reruns, and prescription bottles. His inner circle, known as the Memphis Mafia, tried to maintain a protective bubble around him. They kept reporters at bay, spun public stories to maintain the image of a vibrant superstar, and avoided confronting him about his worsening habits. In many ways, this silence was fueled by loyalty, but it also enabled the spiral. Even as his health declined, Elvis still felt pressured to perform. His management, especially Colonel Tom Parker, booked relentless tours. In 1977 alone, Elvis performed more than 50 shows, despite being visibly unwell. Fans would see him on stage, drenched in sweat, slurring lyrics, and moving slowly. Yet the applause never stopped, and that applause became both a lifeline and a prison. Medical professionals had been warning Elvis for years about the strain his lifestyle was putting on his body. Chronic insomnia, high blood pressure, an enlarged heart, and severe constipation were just some of the conditions he battled. His personal physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, Dr. Nick, prescribed him an astonishing number of medications, sedatives to help him sleep, stimulants to wake him up, painkillers for his joints, and antihistamines for his allergies. By some estimates, Elvis was taking a cocktail of over a dozen prescription drugs daily. While these may have provided temporary relief, they masked deeper issues, especially his dependency. There were times when Elvis's speech was slurred in interviews, or when he appeared dazed during meetings. Friends and family feared for his life, but confronting him often led to arguments or his withdrawal from contact. Despite his deteriorating condition, Elvis resisted hospitalization. He feared that checking into a facility would damage his reputation and disappoint his fans. The show must go on wasn't just a saying to Elvis, it was his entire identity. Unfortunately, it was also killing him. Behind his mansion's ornate gates, Elvis was often surrounded by people, yet deeply lonely. The king of rock and roll had experienced relationships with some of the most beautiful women in the world. But by his final years, he was unmarried and emotionally adrift. His breakup with Linda Thompson in 1976 left a deep emotional void. Though he began dating Ginger Alden in late 1976, many close to him felt the relationship was too new and superficial to provide real stability. Friends noticed that Elvis often reminisced about his mother, Gladys, who had died in 1958. Her loss had been the defining heartbreak of his life, and in many ways, he never truly recovered from it. Those closest to him recalled how he would sometimes spend hours talking about going to be with Mama, comments that blurred the line between nostalgia and a subtle yearning for escape. As his fame grew, so did the difficulty of trusting people. Everyone wanted something from Elvis's money, favors, or association with his fame. This constant pressure made him retreat further, often limiting his interactions to a small circle of loyal companions. But even within that circle, he felt misunderstood. Fame had given him everything, but it had also taken away the very sense of normalcy he craved. On August 15, 1977, Elvis's schedule was set for yet another tour. He was supposed to leave for Portland, Maine, the following day. That night, Graceland was quiet, with only a few staff and family members in the house. Elvis spent the evening reading in bed, flipping through spiritual and health-related books. According to Ginger Alden, he seemed restless, complaining about trouble sleeping. In the early hours of August 16th, he got up to go to the bathroom and never returned. At 2:30 p.m., Ginger found him lying unresponsive on the floor. Paramedics rushed him to Baptist Memorial Hospital, but it was too late. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was pronounced dead at 3:30 p.m. The official cause listed was cardiac arrest, but toxicology reports later revealed high levels of multiple prescription drugs in his system. The news stunned the world. Crowds gathered outside Graceland, some sobbing, others in disbelief. In the days that followed, stories began to emerge about his health struggles, his drug use, and the many warning signs that had gone unheeded. For many fans, the image of Elvis in his prime, young, vibrant, and full of life, clashed painfully with the reality of his final hours. When news broke on August 16, 1977, that Elvis Presley had been found dead at Graceland, the world stopped. Radio stations interrupted programming. TV anchors delivered the stunning news, and millions of fans felt a personal loss. In Memphis, people flooded the gates of Graceland, leaving flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Some fainted from shock. Others openly wept. For many, it felt like losing a family member, not just a celebrity. The funeral, held just 2 days later, drew an estimated 80,000 mourners. Fans lined the streets as the funeral procession made its way to Forest Hill Cemetery. Some traveled from across the globe to pay their respects, while others simply stood in silence, unsure how to process the loss. In the days following record, stores saw a massive surge in sales of Elvis's music. Old singles re-entered the charts. Even those who hadn't followed his career closely found themselves reflecting on what he meant to the culture of the 20th century. The official cause of death listed in 1977 was a heart attack, likely brought on by years of prescription drug abuse. Toxicology reports revealed high levels of various medications in his system, including codeine, Valium, morphine, and Quaaludes. Yet, the coroner's report was vague enough to spark conspiracy theories. Some claimed the findings were intentionally softened to protect Elvis's image, while others suggested foul play. Over the years, several insiders, including members of Elvis's inner circle, known as the Memphis Mafia, have spoken about his heavy dependence on prescription pills. They insist that the drugs were a major factor, but they also point out his deteriorating physical condition, an enlarged heart, high blood pressure, and an overworked liver. Meanwhile, unofficial theories continue to swirl. Some fans argue that Elvis was under intense stress, possibly fearing an upcoming tour he felt too unwell to complete. Others claim there were financial pressures or personal problems that weighed heavily on him. And then, of course, there are the more outlandish theories that he was murdered, that he faked his own death, or that he still lives in hiding. Even decades later, speculation about Elvis's death hasn't faded. Among the most popular theories is that he staged his own disappearance to escape the crushing pressures of fame. Supporters of this theory point to supposed sightings of Elvis in airports, restaurants, and even in the background of TV broadcasts. Years after his death, some claim that a man named John Burroughs, a known alias Elvis used when traveling, was spotted buying a plane ticket just hours after his reported death. Another theory centers on the possibility of a fatal overdose, with some experts arguing that the combination of prescription drugs in his system was more than enough to cause respiratory failure. Yet, official records never labeled it an overdose, leaving a gap for speculation. More fringe theories tie his death to organized crime, suggesting that Elvis's connections to certain individuals in the entertainment and gambling industries may have placed him in danger. Still, no evidence has ever substantiated these claims. In the years since his passing, Elvis's image has shifted from rock and roll rebel to a more complex cultural icon. While his final years are often remembered for personal struggles, they haven't overshadowed his enormous impact on music, fashion, and performance. Graceland remains one of the most visited homes in America, attracting over 500,000 visitors annually. His posthumous earnings regularly place him at the top of Forbes' list of highest-paid dead celebrities. Musicians from multiple genres, country, rock, pop, and even hip-hop, continue to cite him as a major influence. His style, from the flashy jumpsuits to his iconic pompadour, is still referenced in popular culture. Tribute artists perform worldwide, and documentaries and films keep his story alive for new generations. Perhaps most importantly, Elvis's journey, rising from humble beginnings in Tupelo, Mississippi, to becoming the king of rock and roll, remains a testament to the transformative power of music. While the mystery surrounding his final days may never be fully solved, his cultural presence is undeniable. For millions, Elvis hasn't really left the building. His voice, his charisma, and his legend continue to echo.